questions that related more to what Elder Paminda taught, or not directly to this study. I might save for the question and answer sessions tomorrow. But thank you for beginning to hand them in. I'm grateful for that. But there was one question that related directly. It was a question about Elder Jeff Pippinger. And the question asked, I think it blew away. I'll have to find it. It's underneath. The question asked, is it possible for Jeff to change and accept the truth as Miller did during his last times? So it's really helpful if the questioner identifies themselves so that they can interact and be sure that their question is answered properly. But that depends on the willingness of the questioner. So they've done a compare and contrast between Elder Jeff, William Miller, these two. So I'll leave Moses and John for now, because it's these two that the questioner is asking about. So the comment says, William Miller rejected the message of the midnight cry, which was the message of October 22. And then the questioner states, he later accepted this message. So it doesn't say this message, it just says the truth. So what truth did Miller first reject and then accept? Is everything running off the generator? Are we okay to continue? So what message was first rejected and then accepted? So there's a few messages in that time period. You have the second angel's message of the midnight cry. We understand that the structure of the angels in that history, depending on your story, can be different. But there's also the third angel. Here it arrives in October 22. When you construct it the way Ellen White lays it out. So you have the second angel and the third angel. These two messages. Which does William Miller ever accept? So at the beginning, William Miller, he hears the message of Samuel's story. Here's the message of Samuel's story. And he rejects it. And then Adventism teaches he accepted it right before October 22. So we went to a quote, a letter that William Miller writes on October 6 to Joshua V. Himes. And in this letter, he writes to Himes He says he accepts this midnight cry message and he will be very disappointed if Christ doesn't come back in around within 20 to 25 days. So within 20 to 25 days. He writes this on October 6. The exact number of days is 16. So does William Miller have faith in the date of October 22? He never did. Instead, he accepts the concept of autumn feasts. So he says, could be any time in October, within 2025. We know he's being vague, but within 20 to 25 would really take you from the 26th to the 31st of October. He never accepted the firm date of October 22. So he rejected the whole of the message. Then when he accepted it, he said, this is something I've already taught. But he still rejected a key part. Everyone was supposed to know. While they had the event wrong, they were supposed to have the time correct. They were supposed to know when Jesus moved from the holy place to the most holy. So they have a problem here with geography. But the whole of the movement was to have no problem with the subject of time. William Miller failed on geography. End time. Accepting the idea of the autumn feasts was not enough. And it's impossible to accept a part of a message, which is why he fell away. So I disagree with that part of the question that says William Miller accepted the truth at the end. I don't believe that he did. He will get to heaven. Someone will have to sit down with him and explain to him the second angel's message and the third angel's message. After October 22, you have the third angel's message. And Ellen White said, there's a fight for the mind of William Miller. He's drawn towards the message, but his associates pull him away. In the end, the fight is lost. And he starts to war against the message. If he hadn't accepted the third, this second, everything about it that was dark to him, God would have made plain. But he rejected both the message of Samuel Snow, the second angel's message, and the third angel's message, of which a part is the Sabbath, not the entirety, not the whole. He rejected every part of those messages. So the question asks, that part I don't agree with. Miller accepting. then what's behind the question? William Miller is still saved. So doesn't that mean Elder Jeff's position is safe? No matter what he says, what he does, his position is safe. I want to add to this what people have given. I want to add Moses and John. Is John saved? Was John the Baptist saved? Yes. I think we can say yes. Moses. That's easy. William Miller. Yes. So we have this history where Moses dies, but we know that he's saved here. We have John the Baptist. He dies, but he's saved. I remind us of our third story, the introduction of the Sabbath, this message, and remind us the third angel's message that started in October 22. Elder Jeff rejected the midnight cry and the message of the third angel. He rejected both. So if you want to line Elder Jeff, his rejection up with the rejection of the third angel's message, with William Miller's rejection of the third angel's message, you have to tell the story of 1844 to 1850. This is the story of the third angel's message. William Miller rejects it. So when it's a story of the third angel's message, we can learn from this portion of the line that theme, the third angel theme, and Miller dies before the shut door. The shut door is November 9, 2019. William Miller was saved. That's the story of William Miller rejecting the third angel's message. Because our third angel's message has been here since 9/11. We've already been in the history of our third angel's message. So we're taking a story from the Millerite time period where the first angel, Miller, rejects the third angel's message. You take that into our time, and it's Elder Jeff rejecting the third angel's message. Third angel for him began October 22. Third angel for us began at 9/11. So we need to go into Millerite history and use that story, that theme. When you do that, Miller rejected the third angel's message. 1850 is the formalization of that message. In this story, Miller dies here. So each one die. Moses, it's simple, it's on the whole reform line. John, it's simple, it's on the whole reform line. Miller is more complicated because it's going to tell the story in two ways. First of all, the first angel, he wars against the second angel's message, goes through the close of probation, warring against the third angel's message. But then it's also going to line up with John and with Moses, that they all die before the shut door. So my point is, Elder Jeff equals Moses, John, and Miller. Today, does Elder Jeff, is he typified by Moses? Today? No. Because Moses no longer here. Is he typified by John? No. Is he typified by Miller? Yes. When you speak about them warring against the truth. No. When you take the story of the third angel. Miller is dead. John is dead. Moses is dead. So the question is saying, these men are saved. So Elder Jeff must be saved. My point is, Elder Jeff is no longer these men. He's no longer being typified by them. So sometime between 2014, close before 2019, however you want to describe death, if this is literal death, what is spiritual death? It means falling off the path. Elder Jeff fell off the path before the close of probation. There was a point where you could make that argument, but that point ended here. You cannot take that story of the saving of John and make it here. It's no longer that person. So I don't mean to make this moral. I would have no greater joy than to see reconciliation. I love the man. I think we all do. But that doesn't change what the parable teaches. Elder Jeff is not now accepting the truth. And there was a point before the shut door where literal death for him was spiritual death. He fell off the path and took many people with him, just as you would expect in the history of the Sunday law. Which refers back to Elder Parminder's early studies. So that was that question. I want to move on. We're coming back to our reform line. The reform line of the priests. This is 2014, sorry, 1989. 2001. 2014. 2019. 2021. We have a way of explaining this reform line. It's 5 waymarks, 4 dispensations. Within every dispensation, one step of the agricultural process. Ploughing, early rain, latter rain, harvest. We go to Millerite history. And where do you place July 21? You would place it here. July 21 is the beginning of the swelling of the midnight cry. So it's going to swell to August 1, August 15. 3 camp meetings. This one, Boston, Concord, Exeter, Tess. We come back to this history. Opening up of the message in 1798. There's an increase of knowledge. To 1818, formalised. 1833, tested. 1840. So what do we call this study? It's the repeating pattern that in each dispensation there is a message that's unsealed. It's going to swell to this waymark, which we call the increase of knowledge, and then it's going to be formalized here, and then we're tested upon that message. And we find this pattern in every dispensation. So we would say 1989, 91, 96, Time of the End magazine. We would say 2001, 2009, 2012, tested. 2016, 18 tested. That all fits neatly. But I want us to consider it a different way. And think about the messages opening up in this time. What opens up in the dispensation of the ploughing? I hear people say reform lines. What else? Is there anything that threatening about reform lines? Is there anything about reform lines that people would find a threat? Just the concepts. Seeing Moses and Miller. It's really quite a non-threatening study. So at the beginning, of this history, God opens up reform lines. It's quite tame. I go to my Adventist friends and I say to them, we have this understanding of how God reforms his people. And if you line up the time of Moses, you see the burning bush, all of these things. You see a really neat pattern. And they say, that's nice. It's a really neat study. We like this concept. No one's threatened by reform lines. Until when? What becomes an inevitable conclusion with reform lines? It's going to develop into a study of Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And what does this study say? It says we are now in a reform line. So now it's not a nice concept about the comparisons between Moses and Miller. Now it's saying, from saying reform lines to going to Daniel 11 verse 40 and saying 1798, 1989. New reform line, Daniel 11:40. So what began here in innocence develops into something people now view as a threat. It develops into a message that's going to test people. Everyone likes reform lines. Many people don't like our understanding of Daniel 11 because we've taken something innocent and turned it into a threat to them. Because now we're saying Daniel 11:40, 2 parts, 2 reform lines. God is about to deal with his people. This becomes a test or a threat. 2001, a new message is unsealed. What message is that? Begins with the 2520. Now these reform lines threaten no one. They threaten when we bring it to our own time. It's this study that requires people to change their behavior. Does the 2520 require anyone to change their behavior? Is the 2520 a threat? Is there anything threatening if we were to say there's this time prophecy that takes you to 1798 and 1844? We say this 2005. Is that a threat to anyone? No. Does that require you to change your experience? To understand that there's some period of time that took you to 1844. There's 160 years ago. What's the big deal? It's not a test. The problem is, this is mild, it's innocent, But it has implications. The 2520 is innocent. Requires no change in your behavior. But it becomes the catalyst. And what develops? Time. Now you have the message of time setting. And now it doesn't do this. It comes to a 126 and a 151, and it takes you to 1989. Takes these same dates and takes you to 2014. This is not a threat. This requires no change in your behavior. Does this require a change in your behavior? Is this a threat? Yes. So a study starts in innocence. Reform lines. But it has implications. It's going to get to the point where it impacts your life. Now it hurts. So now we're on a reform line. And our behavior has to start to change. 2520 is innocent. It requires no change in your behavior. But it's going to develop to the message of time, which will now become a test. It will hurt. It will change our behavior. A message began to open up here. What was that message? Don't say Acts 27. That's not the beginning point of the midnight cry. Remember, end from beginning. The midnight cry ended the same way it began. And what studies were those? Where did it begin? World War I, World War II. It was all about the king of the north and the king of the south. At this point, people said, that's a really nice study. Elder Jeff saw it, and he said those lines are beautiful. He loved the study of the world wars, of this struggle between the king of the north, the king of the south. You teach the battles of Pyrrhus, the elephants. Everyone loved that. But what's the problem? When you're dealing with reform lines, it has implications. It starts placing us on a reform line. Changes our behavior. 2520 is innocent. It develops into time and requires a change in behavior. That's the ploughing in the early rain. We come to the latter rain, the history of the Sunday law. You have the opening up of an understanding of the king of the north and the king of the south. And it's all these battles and wars in history. Doesn't threaten anyone. If you were to sit down with an Adventist and say we're in World War III, look what's happening with Trump and Russia, they might reject the study, but the concept itself is not threatening. But just like these two, it has implications. What are the implications? If you're studying the king of the north and the king of the south, what are you studying? You're studying a church-state relationship. Once you're studying a church-state relationship, what are the implications of that? You're studying the relationship between men and women. This study, people might not realize, they think we came to understand equality by looking at Obama and Clinton and saying, look, there's a black man and a woman. That's not how we came to understand equality. Equality was introduced to this movement when we thought about the king of the north and the king of the south and polar opposites. You have a north pole and a south pole. This is all built on the model of geography. You have 4 winds: north, south, east, and west. The teachers of FFA are saying that the east wind is about to strike. What country are they referring to? No one knows. Because the east, if I asked you to take me east, there is no absolute place. This globe would just spin and you would just keep taking me around the globe. There's no pole in the ground which marks east. So when we bring this to nations and we talk about the east, it's vague. It's not precise. If I asked you to take me to the west, where would you take me? You have the same problem. This globe is spinning, and the west, in multiple countries. There's no hard geographical point, but it's rotating on 2 poles, which are described as polar opposites. Once you have a model in that fashion, you know you have a parable. And you can compare and contrast the north with the south. The characteristic of the north is lots of ice. Lots of ice. It's very cold. If I was to take you now and plant you in one of these, would you know which one you're at? If I put you right at the center? No. Some people might know the grass. There's like some tundra. Or specific animals. One has penguins. But you'd have to go searching to find a difference. Not saying they're not there, but you would need to look for them. They're extremely similar. At the same time, they're completely opposite. So now we have to bring that model of geography to the king of the north and the king of the south. Who is the greatest nationalist, Christian, white supremacist alive today? Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, sorry, Donald Trump, he came into existence because the Christians in America looked over at Russia, saw how they treat homosexual people, how their women operate, how they control immigration, how Putin speaks of protecting a white Europe, and those Americans said, we want someone like him. Steve Bannon said that. Steve Bannon said, we need to learn from Russia. They are extremely similar. You'd have to go searching to find a difference. Vladimir Putin is a strong Christian. He believes in restricting immigration, keeping Europe white, controlled by religious morals. You don't see gay marriage in Russia. He's a strong conservative. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are extremely similar. Both of them have their power through a relationship with the church. Donald Trump, how was he elected? He was elected because of a Christian evangelical movement. And he must constantly keep them happy or be removed from power. Watch it this year. There's another election coming. He wants to win. So whose favour is he going to court? The church. He depends on the church for his power. They brought him into power. They keep him in power. It's a church-state union where the church has control over the state. The minute Donald Trump steps out of line, the church can just remove him and bring in someone else. Don't know if you know the Vice President, Mike Pence. He's more scary than Trump is. More strict. They could just get rid of Trump, bring in Pence. So he has to constantly bow down to the church. Vladimir Putin is in a church-state relationship with the Russian Orthodox Church. Did they give power to him? No. He took power and then he gave power to them. He controls them. If they don't do just what he wants them to do, he can cut them down. And they know it. The king of the south is a church-state relationship. But it's a polar opposite. extremely similar, while at the same time being the complete opposite. I hope we can see how those two concepts are both correct. So that fits. Trump and Putin. But the minute we come to the King of the North and talk about a church-state relationship, I think we all know how many sermons get presented speaking about the wickedness of this church-state relationship that demonstrates us how wicked it is for a woman to control a man. We've always made this about the relationship between men and women. But the focus of Adventism has always been here. They didn't even understand this structure, let alone accept it. Instead, Christians believe that this is a good model. The man controls the woman. And Christians, they look at this model and they think that's a good model. We will replicate it in our families, in our churches, and in our government. The story of equality came directly from the model of the King of the North and the King of the South. This is not a threat. Requires no change in your behavior. But this does. All of a sudden, a test comes and it requires a change. I hope we can see the pattern. There is a study that at the beginning looks innocent. People love this. They struggle with this. People love this. Elder Jeff loved this. Come 2012, does he love this? No. All our brethren, they might not teach them now. They may have deleted those videos. But they loved this. Even today, while they pretend it doesn't exist, they don't attack it. They know they can't. I don't think they want to, because it doesn't threaten them. But it had implications. Now it became a threat. This is how God introduces a testing message. First of all, in innocence. Then all of a sudden it hits you and requires change. So you can know what we must expect in this dispensation. It can seem like they're two different messages. People look at the ploughing and say that the increase of knowledge was not one message but two that aren't particularly related. Reform lines in Daniel 11:40 to 45. Particularly here, people do the same thing. All the studies of the wars, and then where did this subject of equality come from? It seems like two different, unrelated studies. What I want us to see is the progression. They are one study. All that it is is the cause and the effect. Understanding the increase of knowledge and then how that impacts you. Increase of knowledge and then it impacts you. Increase of knowledge and then it impacts you. They're one connected study. We can cut them up into different parts, and we teach equality now without talking about Trump or Putin. But that's just other layers of what was already demonstrated from the King of the North and the King of the South. This was understood early last year. By early 2019, we already knew that what was testing people, what was becoming more and more clear, was that through studying the King of the South, Pyrrhus, Stalin, Putin, we were being led on a study that was going to require us to confront the relationship between men and women. It was worked into the message in October 2018. The minute you say two streams of information, Obama, Clinton, good. Trump, bad. It's already, the thought is already there, which is why people are already protesting. But everyone thought they accepted and passed the test because Elder Jeff is speaking to people. I don't know exactly what he said, but the concept is, I agree with the world wars. I like the triple application. I like the story of information. He speaks about his son and his connection to the World Wide Web and the internet. All of that strikes a chord because this is easy. It's not the test. Neither is this, which is why those who rejected the testing message of this dispensation, they accepted the 25-20 and still failed. Because the test is the implication. The test is the change in behavior. So like Miller, Elder Jeff is saying that he accepts, but he only accepted a part. And that small piece that looked so small that he and others did not accept was the connecting link between here and here. When they rejected that connecting link, there was nothing that could be done. And it was a matter of waiting to when the rejection would be complete. So we talk about Boston, Concord, Exeter. But when we think about what that message was, we can tend to divide it up. I want us to see the connection. How God is introducing a study to try and create a change in the experience of his people. It plowed us. It watered us in 2 steps. You know that's going to harvest us. We have to be careful that whatever this is, Don't reject the connecting link. Because it's this. That's life and death. So what I want to do is, perhaps now doesn't make sense, once I've said this is the test, but I want to come back to these battles. The reason I want to do that is I want us to understand how we, not just the history, not to give us some knowledge about Putin and Trump, but I want us to consider the methodology, how we take and use history. So I actually want to discuss this part, the battles and the wars. So we don't have much time left, and it's a Friday, so we won't go far. I'll just introduce the subject, and then we'll complete it tomorrow. So we spoke about the beginning and end of the midnight cry. It was all about the king of the north and the king of the south. But what brought us to study that subject was Acts 27. Acts 27 is the story of two ships. A good ship and a bad ship. Ship of Adramyttium, ship of Alexandria. This is good, this is bad. Go back to October 2018. If you watch those presentations, it wasn't, I don't think Acts 27 was firmly taught there. It certainly is in Brazil, January and February of 2019. And when we go through those journeys, we come to here and we talk about Cyprus. And what point do we make about Cyprus? How many prophets do you have? You have two streams of information. In fact, you have two witnesses for that. It shows you an internal stream, internal to God's people. There is true and false. External, there is true and false. Elder Parminda spoke about those two sets of streams. You have special prophets. You have his people. How many streams? True and false. Then you have those journalists. How many? True and false. Those who are warning, those who are not warning. I don't want to go into that study, but I just want us to know, January last year, we're already laying that foundation, because it's already clear that the message of a couple of months previously was not accepted in the way many people think. And we're already tracing the opposition Not necessarily Elder Jeff, but those who he is now forced to align himself with. We can see them manipulate the message, twist it, undermine it. So, all the way from October 2018, December 2018, we're reinforcing the message to show their mistakes in undermining it. January, February, Acts 27, the very innocent first beginning, teaches two external streams of information described as prophets, and two internal streams of information described as prophets. That message of two streams of information was the connecting link. It's a foundational part of Acts 27. Acts 27, because of the number 273, it connected us to a whole other history. This is the history of Panium to the Sunday law. And it took us to another history. Now it introduces us to the lines of Pyrrhus. And it connects in the same way. Shows Panium to Sunday law. And now this study becomes all about the king of the north and the king of the south. So it gave us the following. Pyrrhus, at the beginning of his campaigns in Macedonia. Pyrrhus, at the end of his campaigns in Italy. It connected to World War II, which is part of an Alpha history. So these three were the original. They began the Midnight Cry message. The Midnight Cry message ended August of last year, where the very last subject that God opened up to us was World War I. Now we have World War I connected with World War I, the Third Diadochi War. This one that relates to Pyrrhus being the Fourth Diadochi War. So it's these five histories which are all about wars between the king of the north and the king of the south. There's strong logic to tie each into our history, to show how they all become relevant and fit into our reform line. I just want us to note that this message began with the king of the north, king of the south, but what led us there was Acts 27. this story. This took us to Pyrrhus. We understood that when we connect to the 273, it connects us to a story. This is where I say the evidence for it hangs on the story, on the line. You don't jump from event to event. That's weak methodology. Wrong methodology. But this is a whole history where the structure of this line connected with the structure of this line. Of Panium to the Sunday law. So it was Pyrrhus in two parts. We understood that Pyrrhus fought in two parts. To try and explain that simply, how many wars has the King of the North and the King of the South fought in our history? More than one. Depending on what logic you use, you can see that it's in our history. When we talk about Russia and Putin, that there's a prior history where they're already the King of the South. And that's the Soviet Union. Through all its history, but chiefly under Stalin. If you were to go to Daniel 11 verse 40, that's describing what? Daniel 11:40 part B. A struggle between the King of the North and the King of the South. So when did Russia become the King of the South? You know that it's before 1989. Daniel 11 verse 40. You have this description of 1989 to 91. And it's going to tell us that the King of the North and the King of the South have been fighting. So you have to build a model around this war. Daniel 11:40 part B is taking you to the end of this war, which means this power, the Soviet Union, was already the King of the South. You can understand the King of the South in our time. Its life cycles in different ways. But at the very least, you know it was the King of the South long before Vladimir Putin. Pyrrhus helps us unlock this history. Takes us back to Stalin and the world wars. We understand triple application of prophecy. If you go to Revelation, you only have a description of the first two woes. How much does it tell you of the third? Very little. Because everything you need to know about the third is found in the first and the second. You won't be able to go to inspiration to get a clear picture of World War III. Because we already have two in history. Two woes explain the third. Unlocks the story of Islam for our time. Two world wars unlock the story of the King of the South for our time. What introduces us to these wars is finding that they have a parallel in the history of the fall of another kingdom, Alexander. So we're able to go back into history and understand the fall of Alexander's kingdom. They give us more information to take us to these two wars, the first and the second, unlocking the third. So we're out of time. Tomorrow we'll go very quickly with only 2 presentations. It's impossible to lay out the steps in any detail about how we're led from one study to another study. That's all been done before, fairly thoroughly. But I want us to tomorrow to come back to these 5. These 5 histories of the King of the North and the King of the South. It's this part that unlocks the message. And I want us to review that, not just so we can see all this history of the Third World War, but I want us to consider how we use history. It comes back to the same thought of last class. There's a right way to look at stars and a wrong way to look at stars. There's a right way to use numbers and a wrong way to use numbers. There's a right way to read history and a wrong way to read history. And those in opposition to this movement are using numbers the same way astrologers read stars. And they're using history the same way as numerologists read numbers. None of it is safe. It leads to studies like July 18. So in that context, I want us to review how history opened up, how it teaches us, how we use that methodology. We'll do that tomorrow. So in closing, we talk about Boston, Concord, Exeter. But then we can often have a confused understanding of the messages that come in that history, thinking that they're disconnected. I want us to see the unity in them. Reform lines led to the conclusions over Daniel 11:40. Two reform lines. Two parts to that verse. This study is not threatening. This is. The 2520 is not threatening. To understand that there's just one more time prophecy that takes you to 1844 does not need to impact anyone's life. But it's going to develop into a study that is threatening. They're one study. It's just the development. King of the North, King of the South. Threatened no one. People accepted this. They loved it. But what they couldn't accept was the part that was a threat to them. They rejected the connecting link, which is two streams of information. So when equality was emphatically laid out at the conclusion of the midnight cry, last August, September, it was immediately rejected. But the rejection was here. Already demonstrated from the very first time the midnight cry sounded. Just like in this history. The connecting link. So we'll look at these wars tomorrow. If you kneel with me, we'll close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for how you have led your movement. So many people cannot see light in these messages, but just seeing how you care for your people, that you try ever so gently to lead us, to test us, to cause us to change our behavior, Lord, not in a way that is punishing, but in a way that can bring heaven, already the principles of heaven here on earth, that we can be prepared to return with you. I pray, Lord, that you'll continue to prepare us for our heavenly home, that each head bowed would be there, that we would meet like this again in heaven. And we know, Lord, our love for our brethren who are not with us, whether because they could not come or because they reject these messages. Lord, we love them. We do not believe in a Daniel 12:1 close of probation for 2019. We still hold on to every piece of hope that we can, that they will join us. I pray for them that they may see light in these things, that they may choose this day who they will serve, and that they might understand why they trust this message. I pray, Lord, that they will have a firm foundation. Thank you, Lord, for this camp meeting, for the organisers, all those who have worked hard to make this happen, to make everyone comfortable. Lord, for the cooks and the preparation. I pray, Lord, that you'll bless our Friday preparation, that we can enter into rest together with your Sabbath tonight. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.